into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Okay, hello. Welcome to part 4, I think, the finale of this series on John Brown. We're doing here at Pod Damn America. I'm Jake Flores. That's Alex Patak.
What's up? It's part 4. I got an eye patch and a scar.
Anders Lee's here.
Anders Lee here.
Naomi Karavani, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
There is a whole fuck ton of this story to barrel through, and I want to get it done in one episode so I can stop reading this book, because I'm at the point where you're reading a very long book where it's destroying your life and you want to throw it out the window. So let's do it all. By the way, sorry, I know this is coming out weeks after we started the series. Life is a disaster. I had to get on top of a cum scandal and my AC broke. But here it is, as promised. John motherfucking Brown. Today we'll get to the final act, Harper's Ferry. All right, so last time we talked about John Brown, we did all the build-up and basically got to Osawatomie, where he had finally sort of like shifted this weird tide and sort of actually had a military standoff that changed things a little bit in both the culture and society and in himself, right? Because at the end of like last episode, we're talking about how he's basically just walking around like a fucking cowboy after this, and he's going into town and hearing people like threatening, I gotta kill this John Brown guy, and just going like, he's right in front of you, motherfucker, and he hands him a gun and stuff. John Brown is like a little bit like, he's not full of himself, but he's aware of how badass he kind of is. I think there's like there's a little bit, you could project onto this depending on whether you like him politically or don't like him. Maybe he's, kind of becoming egotistical, or maybe he's just fucking earned it, I don't know.
Maybe he's back to his old him. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
he's back on his bullshit. Osawatomie Brown.
He's the Bugs Bunny meme where he's got the gun. I'm going back to my old life or whatever. I don't know. So
Loosely based on John Brown.
Did they ever do a Looney Tunes about John Brown?
Yeah, where Bugs Bunny has to end the unconscionable practice of slavery.
Yeah, he kills Foghorn Leghorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What animal they used as a stand-in for the slaves? I won't go there.
I mean, it's Daffy Duck. It's
And
not.
that does bring a good bit of levity to the situation.
I'm not even
Not
joking,
having any
man.
pants.
Those old cartoon characters are like a stone's throw from blackface, and Daffy Duck is like the one where they clearly threw the stone the closest to where they were standing.
Yeah.
He's a black duck.
He is. They talked about this on Struggle Session a little bit about how like the early Disney characters, the reason they're wearing like the white gloves and stuff is like that, and then they had to like kind of redo it as society kind of advanced a little. Not joking. So maybe there's an episode. There's lots of cool lost episodes of Looney Tunes. I don't know. But anyway, John Brown. Let's get started. So 1859 is the year of the raid, right? He goes to Cleveland. He meets these people called the Oberlin Rescuers. They go around. He's got this swagger going on. He's meeting other like people that have done more dangerous abolition projects. He sells his horses that he used just recently. He jokes to the people he's selling them to, these are good abolitionist horses. I've converted these horses. He's like starting to get funny and shit. He
Right.
hops around raising money, speaking. People are now like really into him. Transcendentalists are calling him like a holy warrior and stuff like that. He goes to Concord on May 9th, 1959, his 59th birthday. He talks to the Transcendentalists. They're really nice to him. They only give him $10 for some reason. They don't have any money, but they're like, we love you, right? Which you would think is a fuck you, but we'll get to actually how they probably were his most valuable fans a little bit later. he goes and gets the pikes that he had made. He gets his sons together. He gets John Jr., Owen. Salmon tells him to fuck off. He says he doesn't want to kill people anymore. He gets Oliver and Watson.
Pussy.
Yeah, so that's the last of Salmon, basically. John Jr. goes to West Andover, Ohio, with a box of 198 sharp rifles and 200 revolvers, and they're marked mining equipment. So before, they were referring to Harper's Ferry as this mill project they were trying to open so that they didn't get caught in, like, letters and correspondence. And for some reason, they switched it to, like, when we opened the mine. And
which already sounds dangerous.
yeah, it's, like, so obvious. They're like, when we dig the precious metals from the earth, then they'll see. It's fucking weird.
I merely have been working on my waste management company. Don't open those boxes.
Yeah. Yeah, don't open. That's a loot box. I started a company where you get bobbleheads. Okay. John Jr. has insomnia and crying fits. He leaves the raid group to go fundraise instead, and he's kind of out because he's just got he's the one who went insane and they chained him to a spike. Like he's just got PTSD.
Great person to raise money for you.
Yeah.
He actually doesn't raise very much money because he's like just a shattered insane. You
Hi,
sell
this
it.
is John Jr. and I'm calling on behalf of John Brown.
You don't know, man. You weren't there. He's like a non-veteran.
He's just showing up at people's houses weeping, waiting for money to come.
So, John's crew sort of organizes. He's got his sons. He's got a few other kind of sympathizers he's put together. People are kind of adding on to it. They disguise themselves as the Smith family, but they all keep their like first name. So it's just, hi, I'm not John Brown. I'm John Smith. I'm not Owen Brown. I'm Owen Smith. So anyone that knows the name of the family will be like, oh yeah, there's a guy named John. He's got 10 kids named Salmon, John Jr. It's ridiculous. And they go and they find this dilapidated farmhouse called the Kennedy Farmhouse that's about 5 miles from Harper's Ferry, where they make their sort of base operations while they prepare for Harper's Ferry. He's got a guy named Dangerfield Newby with him, Lewis Sheridan Leary. He's got some black sympathizers. Yeah, his name's Dangerfield.
His first name is Dangerfield?
Yeah.
Dangerfield Newby. Oh,
Yeah. He's
and Dangerfield was an interesting character because he was mainly concerned with freeing his wife from slavery. His wife was
Take
about to
my
get sold
slaves,
off.
please.
no, to free my wife, please.
I bet that guy got no respect.
Oh yeah, at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that'd be funny if he just looked exactly like Rodney Dangerfield. He's in a suit and shit. Yeah, so he had about 5 black recruits, which was disappointing to him because he kind of had this idea that there'd be more people. But he was working with Harriet Tubman, and she was trying to get people from Canada, but he just couldn't really get that many people to join up with him. Let's talk about the house.
I don't
for a second.
understand. I sent out my saddest son to get me men.
So
Yeah.
Did he at least sad boy his way into some girls from the battalion? To take arms?
Well, at the Kennedy farm, when they were hiding out, they were like, "All right, this looks way too suspicious with this many men here. So let's bring over some chicks to the Kennedy farm." And
Nice.
so it looked more like a farming family
is
rather
rather than a sausage fest.
that is what happened, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The Kennedy farm was a dilapidated piece of shit. They sat on boxes and just like cleaned guns and made holsters and played checkers and sang hymns all day. They sent people into town to sort of mill about, do a little recon. They even buddied up kind of a little bit to a local pacifist group called the Dunkers, which is pretty cool.
All right.
Yeah, the one from Boston or the Twitter people. I don't know. So he has this nosy neighbor called the Huffmasters, so they keep seeing like black people through the windows, and they're just sort of like, an annoying neighbor.
Yeah. And this was like a stop on or a quote unquote stop on the Underground Railroad. So this is where slaveholders would look for their escaped slaves, this town in Maryland.
Yeah, so it's a real dicey situation. they would sit around inside, and one thing they would argue about a lot is just the raid, because John Brown was becoming more and more fixated on trying to seize the arsenal, so the way Harper's Ferry is laid out is that there is the arsenal where they store all the guns is on an island that is kind of connected to two bridges that I think they have like railroads on them. But it's kind of an insane thing to try to take because you're on an island in the middle of the town after that, and it's strategically kind of a nightmare, but he's like kind of full of God and shit, and is like, it's destined. I have to take this fucking gun island. You were talking a little bit more about, or you were talking a little bit about Cook earlier, Naomi. Can you talk a little bit about his like recon mission?
Oh, yeah. So John Cook, the hot one of the bunch, goes down. There's actually a book written about him called John Brown Spy. And he's a really interesting character. He was a lawyer in the North, I think Connecticut. And then he went down to Harper's Ferry on this recon mission to like get the lay of the land. And he actually like made friends with everybody in town. He published poetry in the local paper. And he got married but used the marriage and like asked the marriage clerk like, oh, how many slaves are in town for that mission, for the Harper's Ferry mission? But his wife did get pregnant, so it may have been a real marriage, though he did use the marriage clerk for information. And then he goes up to Lewis Washington, who was later captured, which is hilarious, and he makes friends with Lewis Washington, the great-grandson of George Washington.
Yeah.
But does he marry him?
He does not marry him, but
strategy of reconnaissance marriages all through town.
Yeah, so Johnny Cook was a really good sharpshooter, but he went up to Lewis Washington and he was like asking about his guns and just seeing how well the guy would shoot, and John Cook just pretended that he wasn't that good.
Yeah.
And then Lewis kind of fucked up, so he knew that he was going to have an easy time capturing him and stuff.
Yeah, they when they did capture the whole crew, they hated him the most, like more than John Brown, even, because they thought John Brown was kind of cool. That guy pissed them off really hard by hanging out with them and writing poetry in their city and shit and pretending to be their friend and then doing the raid. Plus, he was hot or whatever.
Yeah, he was super hot. Also, yeah, later in jail, he gets a lot of female fans who try to bail him out.
Yeah, very cool.
There was real persecution against hot people back then.
I mean, he had a better chance of surviving. But anyways, go on.
I like that he got his wife pregnant and probably accidentally, and then he had to go on 1850s like Maury in the South. Okay.
Traveling Maury.
Yeah.
Yeah. You are not the father. I don't know. Okay, so yeah, it's like a vaudeville show. Just Maury Povich.
Yeah.
So, what was his name? Frederick Douglass visits and declines to join the raid. John Brown says, "Come with me, Douglass. I will defend you with my life. I want for you a special purpose. When I strike, the bees will begin to swarm, and I shall want you to help hive them." He's yelling about beehives.
Yes, he thinks Douglass is going to hive.
Yeah.
Hive them, Douglass.
Hive. We need the D-hive.
The D-hive, yeah.
I can't believe he wasn't motivated by this speech.
Why?
Won't you be the hive for all the bees, Douglas? That could be you with the holes in your skin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he totally is like a Daniel Plainview type at this point. He's like older and crazier. Yeah, so he's yelling about beehives. Really weird considering like the political climate we live in now. Maybe he was onto something. Maybe the beehive works as a metaphor.
Douglas thought the strategy was just was lacking any kind of clear objective, and it would endanger the Underground Railroad and it would turn the country against John Brown because they're going after a federal arsenal. So he's like, you're going into a perfect steel trap. I don't want to join.
Yeah. Yeah, and he smartly...
But he did bring a recruit, Shields Green.
Right, so his friend Shields Green...
The names in this, again.
Shields Green's a pretty cool name. Shields Green decides to go with John Brown, even though Frederick, who he came with, is declining to go. So there's an interesting kind of hinge there where this young guy is inspired to join, and Frederick Douglass, you can look at it a lot of different ways. I don't know. Some people think that he's simply afraid because it is a suicide mission that does go wrong. Some people think that he's warning John that he's, that you're going to kill yourself and I'm not going with you. And, then there's also like the philosophical stuff about the violence and peaceful abolition and stuff like that. And, we'll talk a little bit about Frederick Douglass, like, after the raid or whatever, but he does kind of come back around and eventually come to laud John a bit, right? Which happens with a lot of people. Let's see. John Brown wrote his own constitution and also his own wild-ass Declaration of Independence, both of which are discovered, I think, at the Kennedy farm after the failed raid. And so, like, all these letters and stuff that he had all get published, and then everyone sort of sees, like, the Unabomber manifesto.
Also, people had it in their pockets during the raid.
Right.
So they were found in people's pockets.
Pocket
cut. Gotta have your pocket brown constitution.
Yeah. Your little chick tract. He in his Declaration of Independence, he calls American lawmakers, quote, leeches, swarms of bloodsuckers and moths. Totally unworthy.
They do not hive.
Yeah. Moths do not hive. Leeches do not hive. Totally unworthy.
They spend all day in the closet.
eating my sweaters. Totally unworthy of the name of half-civilized men. Nature is mourning for its murdered and afflicted children. Hung be the heavens in scarlet. So, yeah, he's still doing the thing where he's yelling about wild animals, which definitely reads pretty well to the Transcendentalists, using them as metaphors for things. But you also notice that he refers to the blacks as we instead of they and stuff like that. And so, much is actually pretty... Like, much is made and much is appreciated of this wild-ass shit he wrote when he's in prison and eventually killed. He also had a piece he wrote, I don't know exactly what you call this. It's called The Vindication of the Invasion, which just sort of explained his rationale for the violence. He became paranoid upon learning that his plan was ratted out, or thinking that his plan was ratted out. He yelled at his men because he thought they were being sloppy around town, but he was actually narked on by some Quakers who went to the Secretary of War, John B. Floyd. But Floyd...
Those oatmeal bitches.
Yeah. But also, a lot of people at the Kennedy farm were like writing their girlfriends back home, and we're just like, "I'm on a secret mission."
Right.
Don't ask where. It's here.
And John Brown was getting fed up, and he was like, "If you have to write to some girl, you might as well just send it directly to the New York Herald."
Yeah. Yeah. He was such a prude. Like he was really mad about that, and he thought that's what was what was going to blow the cover or whatever. But these Quakers didn't even blow his cover either, though, because the Secretary of War heard the story from the Quakers. He thought it was the craziest fucking thing he's ever heard, and he's like, "You crazy ass Quakers, get out of here!" So
get out of here, Quakers.
Also, they said that the armory was in Maryland, so they were like, the government official that read the letter said, "Oh, there's no armory there, so this must be just complete insanity."
Crazy ass oatmeal people. Get out of here.
Why don't you go abstain from another war?
So how did they want to free the slaves? Non-violently, I presume.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the non-violent people didn't really have a clear answer, or they didn't have an answer they agreed upon. It was just like, electoral
helping
or
them escape. Yeah, putting money into helping free slaves and helping them escape was
everyone call your representative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you could buy their freedom to raising money.
Yeah, they made a video.
GoFundMe.
Yeah.
They sang "Imagine" together on like a weird projector.
We've gotten the 3 celebrities all in one painting. Imagine.
Yeah. We wrote a letter about a thing called cancel culture. I don't know. Some dumb shit. Same dumb shit they do today, that doesn't work. Vote for, I don't know. So, yeah, so he starts to get some more people joining up, though. He's joined up by this guy named Francis Jackson Merriam, who is a one-eyed and mentally challenged, dark-haired, thin young man from an abolitionist family who's really down for the cause. Basically, somebody was fundraising, and he was like, oh my God, you're John Brown? Fuck, I want to join up. And so he brought like tons of money and rifles and rifle primers and percussion caps, and he was Little Nicky, basically. He was.
Does it say why he has one eye? Is that part of it? Or?
I don't know. He just already had. It's not from the raid. He just already had one
That's
eye.
Another story.
Yeah. And it doesn't really explain what they mean by mentally challenged because he did stuff in the raid. I don't know.
Right. He was just Catholic at the time.
Okay, Saturday, October 15th, 1859, John Brown announces the revolution will happen tomorrow on Sunday. Because, it's...
God's Day.
The theme he's going with.
Yeah.
Sunday morning begins with Bible service led by Osborne Perry Anderson, one of the black recruits. Officers are appointed, so they start to figure out who's going to do what in the raid, right? Owen, Merriam, Barclay, Kopak, they're sentinels for freed slaves. They're going to stay at this farmhouse and sort of like help people. Some of the softer guys here are going to stay back and help people organize the slaves to escape and stuff like that. Cook and Tidd will cut the telephone wires so people can't send telegrams outside of town, right? Smart. Kagi and Stevenson's Kagi, I can't remember how to say the guy's name. Kagi and Stevens and Aaron Stevens take the bridge. Watchman prisoner. Watson and Taylor would then guard the bridge with weapons. Oliver and Thompson will take the Shenandoah Bridge. Like I said, there's 2 bridges, and this is all set around this island. And Jerry Anderson and Dauphine Thompson would seize the engine house, which will come into play later. This guy Hazlitt and Edwin Kopak take the armory, and so on. So there's a few key buildings that they're intending to take. One of them's like a hotel, one of them's a rifle works, one of them's an armory, and then obviously eventually the arsenal. At 8 p.m., he says, "Men, get on your arms. We will proceed to the ferry." Everything went off pretty much perfectly at first. Everyone started, manning their posts. They go up, they take over this guard named William Williams. John sent a racially mixed group, including Stevenson's Cook, Tidd, Leary, Green, and Osborne Anderson, to start freeing the slaves. They went to Colonel Lewis Washington's farm, took his sword and his gun, gave it to Osborne Anderson like the plan was. They kidnapped...
And then when they arrive at Lewis's house, John Cook is there, his buddy, and John Cook is like, "You are now our prisoner." And Lewis was like, "You must be joking. Like, what's going on?" And then Aaron Stevens was holding a torch in his house, and the sparks were flying everywhere. And Lewis was like, "Oh, come into my bedroom and light my candles. Please don't set my house on fire."
It's so funny that they gaslit the great-grandfather or great-grandson of George Washington like that hard. Like, they pranked him for a year, and they were like, surprise.
Yeah.
You got punked.
Yeah, you got
Lewis Washington tried to buy them off with whiskey. He just thought they would go away. Do you want some whiskey instead of kidnapping me? They freed his slaves. They took the Lafayette pistol and the sword of Frederick the Great. They gave the pistol to Osborne Anderson and the sword of Frederick the Great to John. They did the same thing at the Allstott farm. They took hostages to the armory. So they're starting to sort of free the slaves, take these wagons around, take the hostages up, and consolidate all the hostages in the armory, right? But
and there aren't that many slaves in town. I think we covered this, but there aren't that many.
Yeah, there aren't that many, which is part of why this starts to get weird, right? So they start
It's a gesture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like everybody just in the beginning, most people thought that they were just like robbers who, because it seems so crazy to be in this town to free the slaves.
Yeah, it didn't really make sense. And also, so people figured out the abolitionists bent eventually, but at first they were just like, they're fucking robbing the armory. Some weird northerners are coming to rob the armory. They saw black people with them and they were like, what, huh? Like, I don't get it, right? So the most important kind of side effect of this confusing image, though, is that this is where things really started to go wrong. They freed the slaves, and John Brown started going around to the slaves and going like, we're doing a slave revolt here. And then he would hand them a fucking pike with a Bowie knife on the end of it, and the slave would just go like, what? Like, who the fuck are you?
Here, take my constitution.
Yeah. I mean, imagine it from the slave's point of view. Like, this doesn't really make any sense. There's like a mixed group of people. It's very confusing. A white guy is doing this. So after the raid, we'll jump forward a little bit just to kind of make a note about this. The propaganda from the South was basically that this proves that slaves want to remain slaves, right? And that this is all a big fool's errand. And like, look how funny it is that this guy tried to free the slaves and they didn't even want to go with him. But I think probably the better analysis of this is that, John Brown studied all these like slave uprisings, but they were all led by like a slave, like a charismatic, like Nat Turner type from within the group who was black and was one of them. And so, Brown would go, like he did that mission on the last episode where he took 11 slaves, freed them, and then spent like fucking weeks with them going, like traveling upwards to Canada. By the end of it, fucking one of the guys named his son after John Brown. Like you can get, the story to make sense after a while, but just busting into someone's room, handing them an archangel pike, you're white, like it's confusing, and it's probably where the job got a little bit botched.
Right. You probably know the people that they're telling you to murder a lot better than this strange old man who speaks in rhyme.
Yeah.
Also, I think a few of them, I guess in maybe farms nearby, saw what was happening and understood it, but were just like, this is not going to work. So we're not going to join this because it's, it's futile. Everyone's going to get killed.
Yeah, a few blacks, freed blacks that were walking around did join, but for the most part, it was it looked like a fucking suicide mission. And also, the other thing is that the slaves knew how hard that they would punish the slaves after this. The white people would probably get away a little bit easier. I mean, they were doing medieval shit to slaves that tried to run away.
Yeah. And so Nat Turner's rebellion was 20 years earlier, and a lot of militia had been set up, especially around this area, to thwart these kinds of attacks.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you're black, and then a white guy runs up to you and he goes, we're going to go fight the cops together. And you're like, all right, have fun, guy. I'm not going with you, Kagi, I'm going to call him Kagi. I don't know how this name's pronounced.
Kagi, I think it is.
Kagi and Stevens.
Okay.
Kagi and Stevens warned John Brown to meet them at the rifle works and retreat. And everything probably would have went off pretty well if he had done that. If he had kind of given up on this plan of holding the arsenal and retreated into the woods. What was his plan, But he decided to wait for the hive and then use his hostages to escape or die fighting from the armory. Eventually,
who told him about the hive?
Yeah.
What happened to the plan?
I don't know.
Yeah. He basically told his hostages, we have 1,500 men on their way right now.
Yeah, because those were men he assumed would be activated. He didn't actually have them.
But I think he also knew to project the amount of men, or to kind of deceive people as to how many men he actually had.
Well, the sale is about confidence, but I guess my question is just did he have a reason specifically he thought there was a hive coming, or this is just this is imagination at work at this point?
I think.
Well, there's part of him that really did believe that slaves would see this happening and just join it.
Yeah. But he also planned on holding the arsenal more than 3 days. Or 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they were able to distribute weapons, that would have been sort of a feasible plan. Like
It's the same thing with the Weather Underground uprising. They were like, we're gonna fight cops, and then question mark, and then we killed all the cops.
Yeah. No, he did have a very detailed plan, but he just had all these ideas that were just plain wrong. Like most military men say that hills are better to shoot from, but actually it's the ravine. and
why did he think that?
Well, I don't know why he thought that. He just made things up that like he did think through the plan a lot, but
well, I think that the answer to both the hive and the strategy question here are that he just had a motif going on of wilderness that made sense in his like grand. He was getting artistic with this shit a little bit and like talking about how like it was preordained and stuff, and so he saw nature as being very symbolic, which is why the transcendentalists liked him so much, because that was their same thing.
That's the danger of hanging out with transcendentalists, is you just start living like a poem afterwards and you get killed.
Yeah. But he also,
Gun tactics aren't the same as like a dove's flight into the woods or whatever.
Yeah. He also got the run into the wilderness thing from like just studying slave uprisings and stuff. But either way, he didn't do it, so that didn't, that's when things start to go wrong. Another thing that really set off like the beginning of when things got really botched and really fucked was this. So two of his guys had taken they'd taken William Williams, the fucking night watchman of one of the bridges, and the sun started going
Barely
down.
A name.
Yeah.
Williams.
So his relief, the night watchman, Patrick Higgins, saw that the lights were out and became suspicious, and he walked over to see what was going on in like I guess the fucking toll booth or whatever the fuck this guy worked in, and was grabbed by Oliver Brown. Oliver Brown tells him to halt, and he said that I didn't know what that word meant. That was some weird northern word. And so he goes, come with me, and he drags him, and so he's starting to come with Oliver Brown, but then he notices the guns and pikes laying everywhere, and he fucking punches Oliver Brown in the face, and he makes a break for it. He runs to a saloon called the Galt House, where Stuart Taylor, another guard, saw him running, right? And
down here, we don't know halt. We know Galt.
Yeah.
Galt.
So this other guard sees him running for some reason and fires his rifle at him, grazing his skull and knocking his hat off like an old Western movie. So Higgins scrambled into the saloon. The barkeep assumed he was drunk out of his mind because he was yelling and freaking out. And so the barkeep
Robbers
goes
on the bridge.
Yeah, the barkeep goes out to investigate, only to be taken captive by Oliver Brown. So then all this is happening, and at 1:25 a.m., a train comes rolling through, and Higgins runs out to stop the train. It stops there, and there's a standoff with gunfire from the Browns. And this guy named Shepard Hayward, who's a freed black man who works on the train as a baggage handler, walks out. He tries to find Williams because it's a stop, and he's supposed to talk to the night watchman and the original guard, Williams. And Oliver and Taylor point rifles at him. They tell him to stop. He doesn't. And the first casualty of Harper's Ferry raid is fucking Oliver Brown shoots and kills a black guy. So right off the bat.
Oh, yeah.
Not a good
so
look,
sad.
Chief.
Yeah.
It's so sad. And then actually there were statues put up of Hayward Shepherd or Shepherd Hayward. Hayward Shepherd.
Shepard Hayward.
Shepard Hayward.
William Williams.
Yeah, they all have really weird names.
But they did there were Confederate statues put up during Reconstruction, or like Confederate funded, of Hayward Shepherd, like saying that this was the first casualty of Harper's Ferry, and it was a black man. Abolitionists didn't really sympathize with black people, and they got his name wrong on the statue.
They brought their northern aggression.
Oh man, so that guy
Hayward Williams, Shepard Williams.
is that like a character like Shepard Hayward is like one of those people who's like, I don't know, like Bubbles on the Wire or something, just caught in the middle of a bunch of other people's bullshit.
It was just really unfortunate. But also that confused a lot of people because because they didn't believe that it was a mission to free the slaves.
Yeah.
Since they had shot the first guy they killed was a black guy.
No,
so.
it's real bad. It's a big yikes. It's not good, and it's yeah. But
Yikes.
then when
They should rethink this.
Confederates try to, like you're saying, when the Confederates try to take him on as like their own cause, they misspell his name. This is just bad. This guy's just fucking wrong place, wrong time.
He becomes a ghost for sure. He's a vengeful ghost.
Yeah.
So let's see. Cook, Tidd, and Lehman captured the slaveholder named Terrence Burns. Cook, Tidd, and the freed blacks consolidated at the schoolhouse with the arms. Brown allowed the train to leave, which completely fucked him over because, like, if you're going to allow the train to leave, why did you cut the goddamn telegraph wires, right?
Yeah.
The train's immediately going to tell people that, you know, even if they don't know what's happening, they think there's a robbery happening. So...
Right. They sent a guy out and he got killed. Make sure you tell the next town.
Yeah.
Even if you don't know what it is.
He later says that this is him
They wired Washington.
Yeah. At 7:05 a.m., the train conductor wires news of the raid to the Secretary of War, W.P. Smith. He dismisses it as crazy again. But the president of Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the railroad company, sees the message and messages President Buchanan, or telegraphs him, Governor Wise of Virginia, and fucking everybody. And then it starts to get out. So the president, the governor of Virginia, everyone starts to catch wind of what's going on, right? At 10:30 a.m., they start to put troops together. Then Dr. Starry, who had tended to the dying Shepherd Haywood, does like Paul Revere shit. Like he starts going around, he's saying like, these fucking people are coming. He thinks they're robbers still. Brown trades a prisoner for breakfast for his men because they're starting to get hungry. He doesn't eat it though because he thinks it's like poisoned. He starts to get like a little bit crazy. He's like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. He's holed up in this, in this armory. The plan's starting to fall apart. He has like 35 prisoners. They're machinists and armors and stuff. Dangerfield Newby, for some reason, shoots just a random Irish grocer. Dangerfield Newby's a black guy. The grocer's white. So there's just all sorts of... They don't know why. Like, there's just bad... Their plan's not going off very well, right? Higgins goes to get water and runs into Oliver. And so Higgins was one of the guys who was tending to Shepherd Haywood, right? And he runs into Oliver Brown at like a water spigot, and he goes, hey man, like what the fuck are you guys doing? And Oliver Brown, I swear to God, is what he says. He says, this is a darky affair, but he says it like he's like bragging, like, you guys hate black people, right? We're here to free, and that's how he says it. And
yeah,
Higgins, the guy from the town, goes, you fucking idiot, you shot a black guy. I'm literally like trying to save his life right now. I'm just gonna put this out there. The Brown kids have like Venture Brothers kids energy. Like, they're very dumb. Their dad's in charge, and they fucking fuck everything up.
They have very little agency in the situation. I almost feel bad for them a little bit.
Yeah, Brown does apologize to the train conductor and say, we didn't mean to spill any blood. It was my dumb guardsman / son.
Yeah.
My foolish boys. I should have left them for the wolves.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, he's fucking McAfee.
Yeah.
Foolish boys.
You can go to jail for attempting
slave insurrection.
Yeah. The townspeople and local militia begin to form up and rush the bridges, and Brown orders fire to push them back. Dangerfield Newby is killed.
No!
Respect.
Take his life, please.
No.
Newby's body is fucking mutilated. So around this time, I think that the town starts to figure out that these people are abolitionists and that they're working with black people. And then they go from being mad at robbers to being good old-fashioned Southern border ruffian, psycho, racist people, because they kill Newby and they cut off his ears, his dick. They poke sticks in his bullet wounds. They throw him in a gutter to feed wild hogs. 30 to
Wow.
50, you know.
It's not funny, Anders.
Yeah, why did you laugh right now?
That was our friend, Dangerfield
Hogs.
newbie.
What
Sorry.
the Washington football team should have been named.
That's
The Washington Hogs. That's a good idea.
Hogs. I don't know why I laughed, but yeah.
I
That would be a
mean,
reason to not name them that, I guess.
Hogs is a funny. I'll give you that. It's gallows humor, folks. All right. Militia raids. A militia raids the rifle works, pushing Coggy and Leary into the Shenandoah River. Coggy falls in after being shot, and he drowns immediately. Leary is shot and dies the next day in a cooper's shop. Copeland is stranded on a rock and taken hostage. John Brown, realizing he's starting to get screwed, tries negotiating hostages. The Marylanders take Thompson, this guy he gives out as a hostage, and then they just tell him to fuck off. So he starts to realize negotiating is probably not going to work, right? Brown moves with his freed men, some of his men, and all 11 of his most important hostages to the Fire Engine House, which will later become known in history as John Brown's Fort, because this is where he made his last stand. The Fire Engine House has...
Oh, wait, did you miss the schoolhouse?
I think... Tell me about what's going on there. I've got some notes, but they're probably not written kind of in order.
Oh, no. So John and Stevens go into this schoolhouse nearby that had a full classroom of kids, and John Cook goes inside and says, don't move anyone. We just need to store weapons in this room. And please continue learning.
You can count our rifles.
I mean, it's
Write a poem about him.
that's a lot like school today, you know?
Yeah.
That's true.
So the Fire Engine
Active
House...
shooter drill. John Brown is freeing the slaves.
That would make it way more fun. I think.
Yeah, badass.
I wish I had thought of that when I was teaching.
So the thing about the Fire Engine House is that it's got these 3 gigantic heavy oak doors. 2 of them, I think, are a big set of double doors, which he does his main action out of. Brown sends out his son, Watson, Aaron Stevens, and a hostage. Stevens is fucking riddled with bullets. Stevens is his friend who did the Django Unchained shit at Osawatomie. Killed that guy inside of his house who he figured out was trying to kill him. Stevens is a badass assassin, but he's fucking just cut into ribbons. He's still alive, though. He survives the whole endeavor after just being shot full of lead. He would have died, except a hostage named Joseph Brewer rushed him to aid, and then this hostage, Joseph Brewer, for some reason, returned to being a hostage. He's an idiot. He didn't have to do that.
Dumbass.
Watson is shot in the bowels and drags himself into the floor of the engine house, and he's just dying out, bleeding out, while his dad is making his last stand. Will Lehman.
That's one of the worst places to be shot.
That sounds like it sucks.
Yeah, I don't even want to know where that actually is. It sounds rough.
It's your intestines. They're all like, they keep moving the whole time. It's terrible.
Oh. Well, it would certainly cure your constipation.
I don't know.
Folks, I shit out my front.
Folks.
Well, maybe I just like digest the bullet and get it stuck in there.
No.
I went to go free the slaves, but I only ended up freeing the lunch from the front of my body.
Yeah. I'm a real John Brown, if you catch my drift. All right. Will Lehman tells John he's going to check on the schoolhouse, and he just bolts into the river, where he's shot but manages his way onto a boulder. A Richmond man wades into the river with his revolver over his head. Lehman yells, "Don't shoot, I surrender, I was running away." The man smiles and levels his gun, revealing that he was raising his gun in the air to keep it from getting wet. He blows his whole fucking face off, and then a million Southerners convene to use the fucking body as target practice and just shoot it to goddamn bits. So
Oh, no.
they're really mad now. Cook climbs a tree, shoots into the crowd. Someone shoots back at him. He decides to make a break for it. He does get caught, though. Schoolhouse is eventually abandoned, and Tid, Owen, Miriam, all those people all circle back to the farmhouse to plan an escape to the mountains. The mayor, a man named Fontaine Beckham, who is well-liked.
Damn it.
I know, it's fucking awesome.
Schoolhouse just sounds like another of the guys in the party.
Yeah. My name is Schoolhouse Jones. Okay, the mayor Fontaine Beckham is like, he's actually like a really well-liked person in town by both whites and freed blacks. Like, he's pretty moderate. He like, for example, in his will, I don't know, I guess this is like progressive for this area at this time, but in his will, it's condition is that all his slaves will be freed when he dies, which cool, I guess. Sort of.
All right.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
And they do get freed because what happens is he goes out unarmed just to see what's going on and is shot through the shoulder and upper body by Edwin Coppock, one of Brown's men. The crowd, which is already, by the way, drunk, is now fucking furious because they killed the mayor, right? So the crowd raids the Wager House, which is the hotel that a couple of them had kind of taken. They pull Thompson out into the street, and he says, "You may take my life, but 80,000 will rise up to avenge me and carry out my purpose of giving liberty to the slaves." He says that, and then they take him to a railroad trestle and use him as target practice before dropping him into the river. The last thing you see is his ghastly face underneath the river. I don't know how this guy wrote very like descriptively like this book, but it's like you weren't there. I don't know how you know his face was so ghastly. Sounds cool though.
Yeah.
Marylanders are now fully aware that they're fighting abolitionists, and they're also drunk. Oliver is shot through the bowels, through the double doors, and drags his body onto the middle of the floor, just like his brother. More militias start arriving. There's more standoffs. Osborne, Anderson, and Hazlitt escape to the farmhouse. Captain Sin, this guy named Captain Sin, negotiates. He goes to the Wager House, finds Stevens being ridiculed. So Stevens, after he's shot to shit, he lives and he makes it to the hotel. And this captain comes and he finds the fucking ruffians basically just like roasting him while he's like kind of dying. He says, "If this man could stand
You're
on
bleeding on your pants." Like, what are you saying?
Yeah. My man, look at this shirt. It's all red and shit. He says, if this man could stand on his feet, he would clean you all out in a second. So he's this weird captain who just kind of realizes what's going on. Brown now has just Edwin Coppock, Jeremiah Anderson, Dauphine Thompson, and Shields Green, and 2 dying sons. One of his sons begs John Brown to shoot him in the head and put him out of his misery, to which Brown replies, "Die like a man."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, also, you probably didn't want to shoot his son.
Probably also, yeah. Fair enough.
It's a weird I've just never thought about the situation before, I guess.
Yeah.
Let me find this bookmark. So at 11 p.m., Robert E. Lee arrives at Harper's Ferry, and
And then it's all over.
this shit starts to really go down. Okay, so Robert E. Lee arrives, and he's got with him his first lieutenant and his second lieutenant, and he starts to ask his men who would like the honor of killing John Brown, right? Or no, I'm sorry, he doesn't know it's John Brown. Who just wants to take these motherfuckers out, right? And so a lot of people turn the job down, saying it's really dangerous, saying you should send in like your first or second lieutenant, right? So his first lieutenant is a guy named J.E.B. Stewart. And J.E.B. Stewart, how do I explain this? There's a big reveal. He goes to the fucking door, and, you know, Brown has basically got these 2 big oak doors, like, open, but like held to where they're only open a crack that he can shoot through with like ropes and stuff. He's all rigged up to where he has this like kind of murder hole thing going. And J.B. Stewart thinks that they're fighting a gang of abolitionists called the Smiths, because everyone figures out that it was this group of people that were hanging out at the Kennedy house, right? But the thing is, J.B. Stewart fought John Brown at Osawatomie, right? So he goes up to the double doors, he looks through, and inadvertently, Brown just happens to be looking out the doors at the same time, and he sees like the beard and everything. He looks John Brown right in the eyes, and he says, "Oh my God, Smith is Brown. You're Osawatomie Brown, right?"
I came in here to kill Morrissey. What the fuck is this?
John Brown has a gun, like a revolver, aimed right at his face, and later on,
Why doesn't he shoot?
J.B. Stewart says he could have fucking blown my head off right at that moment, but he doesn't for some weird principled reason, and he always kind of respects him for it. So
I respect you not killing me.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest principles is not killing me.
If you don't shoot me in the fucking face, I respect you.
it might be one of those things where they just both are like, "Oh my God, it's you!" like at the same time, because neither of them expected to see the guy that they fought at their fucking last battle, like face to face like that.
They kiss just a little bit.
Yeah. What if we kissed in John Brown's fort or whatever?
What if we kissed? This might be crazy, but all my sons are dead.
So Stewart backs off a little bit, and Lee's men start rushing the doors with sledgehammers, but they're giant, thick oak doors, so no avail. They're not cracking the doors. His second lieutenant, Israel Green, finally makes a crack. He goes up, he manages to break off like the bottom corner of one of the doors and create like a hole that you can duck through, and he sneaks inside. And when he sneaks inside, he eventually comes upon Lewis Washington, the prized hostage, who recognizes him and yells, "This is Osawatomie here." And he points to John Brown. So Green, who's also carrying a sword, mind you, John Brown and Green both have fucking swords on them at this point, and they're like the only people doing battle with each other because the rest of the army hasn't made it through the fucking hole yet. He sees Brown, he pulls his sword out, and he runs and goes to fucking gut John Brown or stab him through the chest. He doesn't realize that he woke up in a hurry because all this was fucking happening. He grabbed a decorative sword. So it doesn't kill John Brown. He said it hit a belt buckle and it just flanged off like it was from fucking like a pirate sword from Party City or something. So he just starts wanging him in the head with it, and he manages to get these like huge lacerations and cuts going on John Brown's head, right? And for the rest of the battle and through his trial and everything, if you don't know this, if you get cut on the head, it's like kind of the most, you'll bleed more than like any other part of your body, but it actually a lot of times isn't actually a serious like wound because your skull is so thick. So if you don't hit a nerve or anything or damage your skull, you just, that's why like pro wrestlers will just like kind of hit their head with a fucking razor blade when they want to like look really gory after a move or something. It's just a lot of red blood just comes out. It's because on your face it looks fucking crazy, right? So
right, you only use 10% of the blood in your head.
Yeah. Anders uses 0.02%.
Yeah. Just use more of the blood in your head, idiot. Yeah, taking shots at Anders for no reason.
So the rest of this whole time, he's just bleeding out the fucking head. It looks like a lunatic, right? And they basically take him down. Anderson and Thompson are fucking skewered while trying to surrender. So two of his men, by the way, at this point have they've actually long since decided to surrender. Anderson and Thompson both asked John at one point, are we guilty of treason right now? Because they're yelling that this is treasonous. And they start to chicken out because they realize they're going to be, like, I guess, hanged for that. Although you're going to be hanged anyway.
What did you think you were doing?
Right.
At what point in this entire operation where you're killing people and freeing the slaves, you're like, I think I could retire later?
Well, yeah, some of them did go on the mission thinking, like, my family won't be poor after this, and I'm going to be successful and famous.
Right. If you were one of John Brown's 12 idiot children, I guess that's justifiable, but everybody else should know better.
Yeah, but it's a really crazy moment in history because, you know, I mean, his whole expedition's gone wrong. His whole campaign is kind of falling apart around him. His sons are dying. He's yelling at them like, shut up and die like a man. His men is like his right-hand men around him are flipping and they're going like, no, we got to escape. I don't want to do this anymore. And he's the only fucking person who just digs his feet into the ground right up until a guy's like stabbing him, and he never compromises all the way through the whole endeavor, right? We'll get to his trial and everything, but he doesn't compromise at all. And that's really what makes all of this work, right? So after they capture him, they send the slaves back to be fucking slaves. They free the hostages, and then they start to interview him for like press and his trial and stuff like that. And this is when they start publishing his letters to his correspondents in the North and his declaration and all this stuff. And all this stuff has kind of the inadvertent effect of making him like really popular actually eventually, but we'll get to that because it's kind of a process, right? So let's see.
Yeah, it's interesting how the propaganda of the crusade to free slaves is so much more attractive than actually what happened, where it was like a slipshod town banditry gone wrong.
Yeah, but it would be so impossible to recruit slaves because there were such strict rules about where slaves could travel, or even where black freedmen could travel. It was also just like strategically almost impossible.
Yeah,
right. Which is why nobody else was doing it, and it kind of took this insane man, whether we like him or not, to get it started.
Okay, all right. This is where I kind of notes get a little bit less linear, but let's talk a little bit about what goes on after this, right? So Garrett Smith. Let's start here. So, I'm recording. Okay.
Oh, also all the townspeople go and just watch the massacre happen, and they like check out the dead bodies and stuff. They're like walking around with their girlfriends, like check out the corpses.
Oh yeah. I mean, you remember the ruffians and shit that he's been fighting this whole story? This is like he went to their town. Like when in like World of Warcraft or something, when you drop your guy in the enemy, you're just in the fucking hive, So
Press X to spectate racistly.
So, yeah, one thing that happens is his financial backers, most of them become really paranoid when the news comes out about what happened, because he's basically seen as, at first, like a Unabomber, terrorist, like Ruby Ridge type thing. And two things kind of form, two opinions, right? In the North, there's an opinion that, I agree with why he did it, but I don't agree how he did it. I like his politics, but not his method. And oddly enough, in the South, it's the reverse. In the South, as soon as he starts talking, everyone really respects just how much of a fucking cowboy he is and how hardcore and rigid and principled he is. But they don't agree that the slaves should be freed. So it's like this reluctant thing where they're like, have to admit that was pretty fucking cool.
That was a pretty badass. Yeah.
I like the shooting people, but I don't know the slavery part. I don't know about that. The shooting was great. I could do more of that.
So I feel about the song "Sweet Home Alabama." It's a good song. Don't necessarily agree with the message.
Right. It's everyone is like, he's like Danzig. Like, I love the Misfits, but this guy sucks or whatever. Or they're the other way around. But in the North, his financial backers start becoming really paranoid that they're going to be arrested for being like connected to this whole thing. So the one who goes the most insane is Garrett Smith, who like all of his letters to Brown are published, and he denies them, but then he turns around to try to like join Brown in prison at one point, and eventually he's just committed to the New York State Asylum in Utica and remains insane all the way through the Civil War. But a lot of people think he was just like quote unquote insane because he just like, you know, politically was untouchable if he's in an asylum or whatever.
But all of his financial backers were like so rich they were still untouchable.
Yeah. Sanborn and Douglas flee. The Secret Six all flee. They start burning documents. A lot of them, go a little bit crazy. Do you know a little bit about what happens?
Douglas flees to Canada also.
Yeah. Do you know a little bit about kind of what happens to Douglas after this?
Well, he's just basically on the run. Everybody thinks he's kind of the mastermind of this operation, but they also have like letters that prove his connection to Brown.
Douglas, we know you're the hive.
Yeah.
You're in charge of the swarm, Douglas. We have you dead at arms.
Yeah, but as like political opinion changes in favor of Brown, Douglas starts to speak in support of Brown as well and says like he was willing to die for the slave. I'm willing to speak for the slave.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of where that's the tack most people take, right? Because they're all just terrified of being associated, and what's happening is that they're cowering to public consensus. They're going with the flow, which is the thing that Brown stood against forever. And he's a real iconoclast. So what happens is everyone except for like Parker and Higginson from the Secret Six kind of turns, but they remain loyal. They try to bust him out of jail. That guy, Lysander Spooner, that anarchist that he had a back and forth with, tries to bust him out of jail too. His plan is to kidnap Governor Wise of Virginia with a tugboat and hold him ransom in a tugboat. But he just can never get the funds together. I think neither can they. Yeah.
3 toots means I've killed him.
Yeah. But
important to recognize he was a primitive cartoon mouse at the time.
Yeah, that's his Steamboat Willie. So then this is where I'm gonna like kind of make an editorial note here, I guess, about this book I'm reading. So this book I'm reading, I think maybe is written with a little bit of bias because but also this might be true. I can't tell. So if anyone knows anything contrary to this, feel free to like tweet at me or email me or whatever. But something I didn't really know about this, and that this story written here makes like a point of telling, is that essentially all of this is undone by Henry David Thoreau because he's on a fast track to be considered a blip in history and just a weird lunatic that everyone's going to disassociate themselves with. Everyone's kind of doing like Epstein shit where they're like, I didn't actually ever go to the farmhouse with that guy. No, yeah. I kept my underwear on,
There's paintings of you at the farmhouse.
Yeah. I never went to North Elbow.
Chris Tucker, you will be my ant queen.
But what happens is Thoreau starts writing about him in his journal, and he's just journaling about him, and he's publishing a little bit, and eventually he gives a talk. And his talk is like, they try to like stop him from speaking in Concord. Like, it's like too controversial. They won't advertise it and shit. But he gives some sort of incredible speech, and then it starts to get people a little bit on the side of John Brown. And from there, he convinces Ralph Waldo Emerson to write about what's going on and talk about what's going on. And Ralph Waldo Emerson at the time is like, him and Mark Twain are like fucking Chris Rock and Louis C.K. or whatever of, 10 years ago. Like they're like the biggest
of poems.
Public, maybe should have used Louis, but you know what I mean? Like they're like the biggest fucking public speakers. They're like, traveling around. They draw these huge crowds. They get paid a ton of money. And so...
I'm sorry, I'm really stuck on Ralph Waldo Emerson just being like, you ever want to fuck your own daughter?
Yeah.
In the woods? You ever notice how you're
beautiful? Kind of like my daughter.
Yeah.
Looking good.
My dick is like a dragonfly. So Emerson starts to go around and give these speeches, and suddenly there's this like cultural turn. Actually, I'm skipping ahead a little bit though. That's because this book is kind of written out of order. So that happens a little bit later. But first, let's talk about the trial. He's taken a trial, and the fucking trial, I swear to God, it's one of the funniest things in this whole story because him and Aaron Stevens are like just beat to shit, and so they're put on a cot and a mattress where they're just laid out in the middle of the room. And Brown just like lays down, and then like when it's his turn to talk, he gets up and he just says some wild shit, and then he just goes back to sleep. And the spectators are they're literally eating peanuts and throwing the shells on the floor like you're at Logan's Roadhouse or something.
Yeah.
They're smoking cigars, they're chewing tobacco and spitting the spit on the floor. And like the description of the room is so funny because everyone has their legs up on the table. Like his defense attorney sits in a chair with his legs up on the table, and then like the prosecutor is also like leaning back and going, "Well, I disagree," while his legs are like up on a table. Everyone's smoking a cigar. The judge is presiding over the court while leaning back in a chair with his legs up on a table. Everyone is doing this weird Southern court shit where they're just like can't be bothered or whatever. And
white people have too much power at this time.
Yeah, but they like push to have him tried in Virginia rather than in Washington.
They did because the crime was committed on federal property, but that came up like in the trial, and eventually they just overturned it because I guess they used something called precedent, which is just like, well, other crimes that have happened at the armory have been taken to trial locally, so fuck you, you know. And he has this this the first lawyer that is prosecuting him. His name's Charles B. Harding. Charles B. Harding falls asleep all the time. He's smoking the whole time. The judge keeps yelling for order. He's
order. I mean, wake up.
Yeah, he's fucking drunk the whole time, and he has a black eye. And at one point, the judge asks him, like, "Why do you have a black eye?" And he says, "Well, last night I got into a fist fight with a blind N-word." And, and it's like, wait a minute. You fought a blind guy and he beat your ass? It's so fucking good. Everyone, it's just Southern lawyer guy all over the place. And like, Harding is dismissed from the court after the I fought a fucking drunk guy or whatever thing. I fought a blind black guy while I was drunk.
You would wish they were a simple Southern chicken.
Yeah. So Brown's defense is a team of Lawson Bolts and Thomas C. Green. Green is loud and boisterous and says "war" and "thar" a lot, and he brings up the federal property thing. I think Bolts is the one that brings up. There's this photo they try to bring up to claim insanity because the Potawatomi gets brought into this whole thing, and they try to use it as an insanity case. Because maybe he's just a crazy murderer, you know? Well, then you have to fucking sentence him to jail. Maybe you can't hang him, right? And so as a proof of his, like, insanity, they find this photo that he took shortly after Potawatomi. And he was really rattled after Potawatomi. But the photo is just a weird photograph. I think it was just taken, like, you know, sometimes your camera's moving when you fucking... You take the photo and it's smeared a little bit. He looks really weird. Yeah. He's got one eyebrow up and just this weird, like, fucking kind of frowny thing going on. And he looks like that emoji with, like, the tongue out, basically.
Yeah.
But it's not proof of insanity, though.
So the picture, they're trying to sell the insanity on, like, look at this crazy picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just I wouldn't post it, but
it's also a very interesting defense to be like, he's not an anti-racist revolutionary. He's a madman.
Yeah.
He's killing at will across America.
Yeah. This Boston lawyer named George Henry Hoyt appears and joins his defense team, which is really odd because he's this young guy with like no beard, and he's like he's very boyish looking, and they don't know where he came from, but he's actually a spy sent by Northern abolitionists as part of a plan to break him out of jail. And he contacts Brown, and he tells him about it. But Brown doesn't want to be broken out of jail. He eventually
wants to die.
He fucking just wants to die. It's so hardcore. He becomes furious during Brown at one point becomes furious during Hunter the drunk lawyer gets replaced with a guy named Hunter. Hunter's recollection of the killing of William Thompson. That's the guy that they just tore to shreds. That's the only time Brown got mad during the trial, is just when they were describing just desecrating the shit out of his friend. And eventually Botts and Green are dismissed, and now it's this spy boy Hoyt, and then these two new lawyers, Chilton and Griswold. He's gives his self-defense, which I'm gonna pull up. Let's see, where is it? Come on, book app.
And they also try to dig up his family history of insanity in the family to be like, look, he's insane. And then John Brown gets up and says, no, I'm not.
Every time they try to get him off by saying he's insane, he demonstrates that he kind of isn't, which really, at this point, he's bent on death. It's insane. At one point...
Well, I mean, there is a part where it's like you essentially led all of your children to a violent death. Maybe he just has depression, but I bet that wasn't it for him.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm kind of a believer because, the only reason that like his message really worked is because he didn't back out. And everyone was just so impressed by his principle. And so he gives this huge speech at one point when he's just like doing that crazy shit where someone defends themselves in court. He says, I have, may it please the court, a few words to say. In the first place, I deny everything, but what I have all along admitted of a design on my part to free the slaves, I intended certainly to have made a clean thing of that matter, as I did last winter when I went into Missouri and took the slaves without the snapping of a gun on either side, that's not true, by the way, moving through the country, finally leaving them in Canada. I designed to have done the same thing on a larger scale. That was all I intended. I never did intend to murder or treason or destruction of property or to excite or to incite slaves to rebellion. That's also not true. I have another objection, that is that it is unjust and that I should suffer such a penalty. Had I interfered in the manner which I admit has been fairly proved, for I admire the truthfulness and the candor of the great portion of the witnesses who have testified in this case. Have I so interfered on behalf of the rich, the powerful, the intelligent, and the so-called great, or in behalf of any of their friends, whether father, mother, brother, sister, wife, or children, or any of that class, and suffered and sacrificed what I have in the interference, it would have been all right. Every man in this court would have deemed it an act worthy of reward rather than punishment. The court acknowledges, too, I suppose, the validity of the law of God. I see a book, kissed, which I suppose to be the Bible, or at least the New Testament, which teaches me all the things whatsoever that I would that men should do to me. I should do even so to them. It teaches me further to remember them that are in the bonds as bound with them. I endeavor to act up to that instruction. I am yet too young to understand that God is any respecter of persons. I believe that to have interfered as I have done, I have always freely admitted I have done in behalf of his despised poor. I did no wrong, but right. Now, if it is deemed necessary that I should forfeit my life for my furtherance of the ends of justice and mingle my blood further with the blood of millions in this slave country whose rights are disregarded by wicked, cruel, and unjust enactments. I say, let it be done. And then everyone was like, holy shit, that was badass. Everyone got silent after that. And the thing you notice, I know I just kind of butchered his weird old English or whatever, but it basically invokes the law of God, and that's part of why the South can't really get him.
Oh, you got us.
Yeah.
Oh.
He really does defeat people with logic. I also know that this book seems like it might have been written by a libertarian type person because they're like, he defeats them with logic. Individuals can, affect history in this way or whatever. There are some things going on, so take that with a grain of salt. But, argument could be made that, he really dumbfounded his audience. And a lot of
I also think he was successful in the way that he just scared the shit out of everyone in the South. And especially around Harper's Ferry, people started to pour into the town and from the surrounding counties where people were in more rural areas. And they were afraid that there were more John Brown troops coming. And they were poured into the town. And everybody thought that there were so many more men. So I think he just, was successful in that way too.
Yeah.
I have to wonder if it would have been more politically useful. Like, I know this wasn't a pragmatic person, but if he did just escape from jail when the guy gave him the opportunity, everybody could be afraid he's coming back.
Yeah. True. But I think
maybe done more for the struggle if he wasn't such a weird zealot.
Well, at that point, he was kind of like in his element, though. Like, he liked having the opportunity to hold court at the jail, so to speak, and talk to people and give his view of the world and answer questions and that.
But he also knew he was going to be a powerful symbol as a martyr. Not only the fear of people attacking you, the fear of abolitionists who are fucking crazy and willing to die. So if you love having slaves that much, you have to be also willing to die for them. That's what he set up after this.
He definitely got really into the martyr thing. Obviously, it's his whole fucking thing, right? But and you notice in his speech, he does say I'm too young to know the word of God and all this stuff. So he does interesting theological shit where he's not comparing himself to Christ, but saying I would die for that cause and all this stuff. He also invokes the Constitution, which is probably pretty big deal to certain people down there. But to speak to I guess an argument that he is doing this on purpose, the way that Emerson and Thoreau write about him after this is that, before all this, when he was Cowboy John, he would when people were talking, sometimes he would go talk, fuck that, and he would pull out his gun, right? Fucking cool. But he turned after he was captured. And the way they put it, the metaphor they used is the value of the lead in a bullet versus the lead in a typewriter, I guess, or in a letter. Mm-hmm. And they said he fired one bullet that activated the typewriters of the New York Herald and Tribune and all these newspapers for 3 straight weeks. So his power, he swung the actual combat event into a narrative, and that was his real power. So this is the end of the John Brown Pokemon movie where he realizes his true power was his message or whatever all along. And he's only able to get it out by remaining 100% fucking bulletproof in all these interviews and when he's on trial and things like that. And when he never cowers. And so his steadfastness, he never logs off, you know what I mean? He never gives them fucking anything to go, look, he was a coward and he actually, fuck him or whatever. He eats his own cum.
He
I don't know.
Didn't block anyone.
And he eats his own cum.
And he's like, yes, I do eat my own cum. And they're like, God.
Did not Christ eat his cum?
Well, all right. Let's see.
Someone should put, what are those called? Biscuits that they What's communion? Communion wafers.
A wafer, yeah.
Come on a communion wafer.
A communion biscuit.
Yeah, Wendell Phillips is the one who said, lead is waged in bullets, and it is much better made into type. He fired one gun and has made use of the New York Tribune and Herald for a fortnight. We can talk a little bit about the fugitives. Miriam, Cook. Cook gets arrested. Oh, yeah. So Cook escapes with the crew from the farmhouse at one point, but then he gets hungry and he goes in and asks someone for food, and they recognize him and they arrest him. And like the rest of the crew sees them taking him off on a train. And at one point, the guy who arrests him is like a neutral guy on slavery. He's just a bounty hunter, but he's like, well, it's $1,000. Like, I got to take you. And then Cook eventually says, I'll give you like more money than that if you let me go. Yeah. But he's already sold him to a sheriff. And the guy's actually like, oh, shit, dude. Like, he's like, I wish I hadn't done that. He fucking ends this guy's life.
Oh, poor Cook.
Hazlitt is walking in the woods with, I think, Edwin Kopak, not Edwin Kopak, one of the other ones. But he eventually, his fucking feet get jacked up. He gets the Joyce Carol Oates foot, and he can't walk very fast. And so he gets captured, and he goes to jail, but he tries to disguise himself and take on a fake name in jail. All the way up until his death. Like, when they're walking to the gallows, they all just wink at him, like, hello, not Hazlitt, you know?
Yeah.
But he still dies. Owen, Tidd, and Kopic took dinner from a random farmer and had to... Oh, yeah, this is really funny. So, Owen, Tidd, and Kopic eventually have to ask this random farmer for food, and he comes in and he goes, dear God, get in here. Don't you know what's going on? Because at this point, the news of Harper's Ferry has spread so far that it's like 9/11. That's the only fucking thing everyone's talking about. And they're like, no, we've just been in the woods hunting or something. And so he's like, dude, you got to read this. And while they're eating, he makes them read the newspaper aloud. Like, he's like, dude, you have to read this. And they're like reading about their own selves while maintaining their fake identities. And they're like, wow, these guys suck, you know? A lawyer named George Sennett gets assigned to Shields and Copeland, yada, yada, yada. Let's see. So, Brown becomes mega popular in the 7 weeks between Harper's Ferry and his death.
Man, they let him stay alive that long? 7 weeks?
But, he was ready to die. He was very cheerful with his captor, his jailer, this guy named Avis, who he, like, when he died, he gave him one of his Sharps rifles from the raid. You know, the guy treated him well. He was ready to die, didn't care. He let him kind of just out on parole and shit and, like, talk to people and take visitors and stuff. There was a meteor shower over his jail at one point, and, like, Melville and Whitman and Thoreau all wrote poetry after this where they called him, like, the meteor. He got tons and tons of letters, and then, like, everyone visited him in jail from, like, the whole story, like it was the end of a fucking novel or something. And at one point,
Stevens, who was, you know, all lit up and in jail, Jenny Dunbar, the woman he was writing letters to and in love with, came all the way to the jail to tell him, like, the day before he was gonna die, that she was not in love with him.
Wow.
Hey.
Owned. Damn. I'm trying to think of an internet thing to say about that. I don't know. I can't remember. Fucking brain's broken. Let's see. Okay. So Mahala Doyle, the widow of one of the guys he killed at Potawatomi, comes to him, and she's just describing how much she hates him and how he, you know, dragged her husband and son out of bed in the middle of the night and gutted them with swords and bullets and shit. And
maybe you should talk to a therapist about this.
Yeah. There's a sculptor that comes, makes a bust of him. Finally, his wife comes and visits him, Mary, and he asks her to throw...
To have another child.
Yeah, please, one more salmon. He asks her to... What he wants to be done is all of the dead brown kids to be thrown on a pile and burnt which they could just carry back home to North Elba, and that like disgusts her. It's just, no, I'm gonna take you guys all in coffins and stuff. If we can find them. They threw one of the brown kids into the river. They can't really find him, but they've at least got John. December 2nd is the hanging, and so many soldiers are present that barely any witnesses even really spectate because they just amassed so many militias from surrounding areas that it's just all... There's just a fucking million guys with guns on them, and guns like, sniper points and shit, because they expect someone to try to rescue him from the gallows, right?
Yeah.
He requested to be led multiple times, by a group of black children and their old gray-haired mother. He didn't really say anybody in specific. He just wanted to be led to the gallows by a bunch of black kids and an old gray-haired lady, and they didn't do it.
That's extremely specific.
Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah. He did hand a guard a note on the way to the gallows that said some wild shit about his message kind of carrying on and stuff. And there's a story about him kissing a black child as they lead him out of the jail, but it's not true. It was just like a painting.
That was on his campaign earlier.
Yeah. There's this guy named Sadler, the Undertaker, who describes him as, he says, "You're the gamest man I ever saw." This is the Undertaker, right?
Yeah.
At the time that meant down to clown or like skinny?
Well,
it meant like strong-willed.
No, I think he meant he's ready to die. Like, I'm game.
Oh, yeah. Fierce.
He was like, usually people aren't like chomping at the bit to get up into the noose and stuff, but Brown's like,
yeah.
You fucking ready to die?
Yeah, he thinks he's getting salvation.
So. Yeah.
Yeah.
You truly died like a gamer.
So they put him on the gallows, and they put him on top of a trapdoor, wrap a noose around his head, put a white bag over his head. In the crowd, John Wilkes Booth and Robert E. Lee are there. Wilkes Booth kind of goes on to say that he really hated the guy's politics, but admired his methods. Pretty telling. Stonewall Jackson is there. At the time, he's known as Thomas Jackson, and he's also a Puritan. He reads a prayer for Brown. They put him on top of the trapdoor and put the noose around his head. And the hanging is delayed for 10 minutes as the troops have to get into position and things just kind of go off. So he's standing there for 10 straight minutes, not knowing when he's going to die. They snap.
It's like a comedy show in Brooklyn, am I right?
Yeah.
Whole crowd's here. Show's not going to start. Come on.
Yeah.
That's when you're getting ready to kill.
The executioner shows up late.
Yeah. He's also a DJ.
Yeah.
They finally snap the trapdoor open. The hinges screech. He drops only 2 feet. It's a very short noose for some reason. But they say his contortions were not extreme. His legs did not shoot up. He's hanged for 35 minutes. He eventually is cut down, crumpled to the floor. His face is purple. The noose makes a gash an inch deep in his neck, and he's thrown pretty unceremoniously into a black walnut coffin. Mary escorted it to Philly. The mayor of Philly, fearing riots, sent out a decoy coffin in case people were going to try to riot over his fucking coffin. Undertakers open the coffin, see that he's been stuffed in with his head underneath the rest of his body, which causes his face to become black with blood. They have to ice him down, restore him, put him in a new non-Southern coffin because they don't respect this Southern coffin, and carry him on a carriage through like a blizzard, through a boat to New York, eventually to North Elba. Lyman Epps in North Elba, his half-black, half-Native American friend, sings "Blow Ye the Trumpet Blow," and he's buried beneath this mountain called Mount Whiteface, which is also known as Cloud Splitter because it's so fucking tall. Pretty cool, right?
Cool.
Yeah. One of the other biographies is named Cloud Splitter because they use like the mountain as a metaphor. And
it's also the name of my penis. It's just a fun coincidence.
So that's his life. He dies in he dies and he's buried in, they make it back to North Elba, which is where he, lived and formulated all his theory and where his family lived. And he's buried with his friend, or by his friends underneath fucking Cloud Splitter. And I guess to wrap this all up, like, the story here would be pointless if we didn't talk about how it affected history after it, right? Because the whole question of, like, whether John Brown was good or bad was, did this set the whole movement back? Did it plant the seeds for the movement? People on both sides of the Mason-Dixon line will argue differently about that. But, I mean, if you look at, like what happened after he basically really stuck it out all the way to the end and became a martyr is, they were having ceremonies and, like, parties and stuff and, reading from the Bible.
John Brown Brody's cookouts.
Yeah. In Haiti, he was a big fucking Haiti head. They just sang in the streets for like 2 days and made these big banners that had like quotes from him on them, right? And he particularly inspired Victor Hugo, the author of Les Miserables, the French poet, who essentially wrote about it as like, this is exposed to the rest of the world what is going on in the American South. And he incorporated Brown in Les Miserables and the character of Jean Valjean a lot. There's all that religious shit at the end. And I don't know. I mean, like, after this, no one really knows for sure exactly what's going on with this. It's kind of contested. But, like, when they fucking made the Statue of Liberty, it had chains in its hand. It was about, what the rest of the world saw in terms of the conflict of slavery in America. There's a commune, one of the Paris Commune leaders named Pierre Vesnier. I don't know. I can't find the quote I was looking for, but that's probably not important. Okay. Well, anyway, so yeah, I mean, he becomes this like savior. People start to write about him. He arguably turns like the culture, right? Which is like a hard thing to do. He turns the tides of like what is publicly acceptable to sign on to, because abolitionists in the North were, so many of them were like, well, I believe, but nobody else would, which is like such a problem historically in getting anything done, right? And
right. We still have that today. Yeah.
Exactly. We're living in a, the thing was taboo, but everyone fucking agrees it would be a better way to do things, but it's, you're worried everyone else is going to judge you for it, right? I don't know what the word for it is when you shift a huge, like consensus or cultural value or something like this, but he did it.
Sea change,
something like that. God, that's
turning point.
Boring academic point, but or way to put it. But yeah,
you overturn the window,
something like that. I don't know. This is all. This sucks to look at John Brown's grave and go, you really shook things up in there, pal.
Yeah.
Really shook the gates to heaven, didn't we, Wayne?
But what happened afterwards is, there's this like presidential election, and Lincoln is running, and this guy Seward is running, and as the issue of slavery becomes something that is kind of, you can't not talk about it, Lincoln actually rises to the top of the race because he is a moderate, and in a weird way, I guess the argument can be made that the Overton window got shifted so hard that like people were a little bit worried about electing somebody who was that far over, but he's now in the middle, kind of the way like I don't know who the fuck you would even put there. But eventually he's the guy who's able to sort of become the helm of the Civil War. And in the South,
but Lincoln ran on not expanding slavery. But eventually, if you don't expand slavery, then you have new states entered into the Union, more representation for free states, so slavery would end anyways.
Yeah.
Slavery for those who want it.
Yeah.
The South became like so angry and so roiling that they were they were just killing anyone and everyone that they thought might be associated with the Browns or with the North or with the Republican Party, with abolitionists, or just with the North in general. People were getting hanged, tarred and feathered, fucking pushed out of like moving trains and shit. You know, people were just being murdered in the street. So there's a boiling point where it became clear that the institution of slavery was under attack, and they were so paranoid that they would just kill anyone in the street, which I guess created like the powder keg that sparked the Civil War, right? Because you can't go back to just normal society after the question of, you know, do we get rid of this thing is causing people to not be able to sleep and just stay up with guns, shooting them into their front yards and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to keep business as usual after the lynchings.
Yeah.
You know, that it's got to be a war.
Him and Nat Turner, they both kind of started this sea change, whatever you want to call it, in public opinion. And historians, a lot of them like to dispute that. People who are a little more conservative will say, like, oh, they set things back, which is a way of covering for, you know, slaveholders. Because the truth is, in places like Virginia, especially after Nat Turner's rebellion, slaveholders started to say, you know what, maybe we should think about like incrementally abolishing slavery. Like someday, 100 years from now, we'll abolish it, because they saw what happens when slaves are left to their own devices, when they get the ability and they are given an actual tangible opportunity to rebel and to change things, and they'll take it. They'll kill people. They'll kill you. This is a violent system.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We should do something about this later.
Yeah, not in my lifetime.
Right, not me, not now.
Yeah,
but
a lot of people would free their slaves in the wills, but then the children would be like, no, I want those slaves.
Yeah, it's great having slaves. You know what this has really given me respect for is Frederick Douglass. Probably, you know, in retrospect, you're like, why wouldn't you want to be part of this revolutionary moment? But when you get into the details, it's very clear, like, oh, this guy didn't like have a plan that resulted in anyone living. You know?
Yeah. He didn't want to
Makes
die.
a lot of sense.
But also he said, like, I've always been better known for fleeing than fighting.
Yeah.
An aside about Frederick Douglass is he also made his money, you know, speaking around the country and around the world, went to England and stuff. But people he had really funny parts of his speeches, and one funny part was an impression of a Southern Methodist preacher, and if he didn't do it, the crowd would demand that he do it. They would be like, do the preacher. Do it.
He's like, Randy.
Yeah, do Randy. I'm Frederick Douglass with 8 A's.
Yeah.
How about Frederick Douglass doing random?
There you go. Random.
I don't know any of Random's material though.
It's just there's no good or evil. It's random. There's no free or slavery. It's Douglas. I don't know.
God,
it's
poor Douglas.
I'm going through so that's, you know, I pretty much wanted to go up to the end of his life and then just sort of just kind of end on here and talk about how this maybe vaguely kind of implies what happens afterwards. My notes, I was up pretty late last night. I started to get drunk, so they're getting harder to read. But there's a funny story I remembered about a bunch of Italians that didn't speak English that wandered into the South, and the paranoia was so high that Italians, they just thought, like, somebody was like, they asked for directions, and a guy handed them a note and wrote it in English, and he said, give this to someone in the next town. They'll put you in the right direction. But what he wrote, knowing they couldn't read it, was like, I am friends with John Brown. So they would just get fucking murdered immediately, which they did.
Oh, man.
Shit. It's like my cousin Vinny.
They were probably anarchists anyways.
Yeah. 3 days after the hanging, a Virginia newspaper declared secession inevitable. So that's another thing that happened, is that this basically put the South in a situation where they no longer saw being part of the Union as a viable future, which created, you know, the movement for secession, which created the premise for their part of the war, for sure, you know, and then it pushed the North into a situation where it had to answer that, which turns into the Civil War. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a big question about Brown is, did he cause the Civil War? I mean, is this a person lost to history?
Directly a year after his death.
I think what's really interesting about reading about all this stuff is that he was like in the news. He was something everyone in America talked about after this happened because of the way things went down and his trial and his interviews and everything. And so this is not an aberration. This is not a one-off blip. This is something that they also don't teach you in school a lot of the times because...
Well, in my class, we learned it.
That's
I was
right.
like, wait till we get to John Brown kids.
Yeah. So your class is good. In my classes, they did not teach us. And it's weird that it's like the start of the Civil War, the fucking thing that started it, you don't teach.
Yeah.
Well, why is that? Well, it's probably because of that like Texas monopoly on textbooks and stuff like that, giving
true.
A slave owning state wanting to downplay that sort of shit.
And there were, but right before the war too, a lot of southern states would complain, especially around the election of Lincoln, that the federal government wasn't going to protect them from another John Brown.
Yeah, they demanded that federal troops come and protect their slaves, or not protect their slaves, but defend their slaves from capture.
Yeah.
Protect them, yeah.
Yeah, protect them from abolitionists, basically.
Yeah. That's so funny because they're such anti-federalist, just fucking assholes.
Right,
yeah.
right. It shows, states' rights is a total...
Yeah, it's total bullshit. And also, the Fugitive Slave Act, they would demand that the federal government enforce that. That was the major bone of contention, too. And that was a federal law.
Yeah. All right, well... I think I'm basically out of notes. I think that's probably a good point to come to, unless you have anything else, Naomi.
There's one thing, I guess, during the war. Okay, the year after the attack on Harper's Ferry and his hanging, people are like, "Oh, I don't know, do we stand with John Brown?" But then when the war hits, everybody is thinking about this warrior persona and becomes totally accepted. And in Lincoln's after the Emancipation Proclamation, when Lincoln recruited black soldiers for the Union Army, on the flyer was the song John Brown's Body.
Yeah. Right. Which, by the way, so earlier in this series, I made an apocryphal note about what I thought was an apocryphal note. I'm doing a double apocryphal thing here. Yeah. The song John Brown's Body...
Double apocryphal.
The song John Brown's Body is actually about John Brown.
I don't know where you got that it was...
Well, I'll tell you where I got it. Somebody, just a friend of mine, said, hey, it's not actually true. And I was like, is it? And he linked me to an NPR piece about it. There's This American Life where they got it wrong. They think that it's yeah, it's common myth that it's not actually based on John Brown, but I had heard that before. Right. I read that other places.
There's also an epic poem called John Brown's Body by
John Brown is slang for heroin in certain parts of America.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was immediately after his death lionized pretty hard. Once the tide tipped over, Julia Ward Howe was one of the people at his wake, one of his closest people in his circle, and she wrote John Brown's Body specifically about him. I don't know how that myth got out there about that it wasn't actually him. Maybe it's a Southern thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But also, I think one more thing that's really interesting is the language that he used, the sin of slavery won't be purged but with blood from this land or whatever. Lincoln kind of uses the same verbiage when he's in the middle of the Civil War, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Lincoln borrowed from John Brown. He borrowed from Marx, as we know. There's a lot going on there. And
he's like he's like the fat Jew of the 18th century. Just stealing from content creators across the world.
He's just in a tub of ranch dressing. Is this comedy? No.
Is this not comedy?
That's what the fat Jew was. It was his act for a while. I don't even know. He would just do Instagrams of himself dipping himself in various sauces. It was fucking weird.
Now that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of interesting that story would get out there, because what it's trying to imply is that he did not become lionized until well after the fact. But it's not true. I mean, immediately after by the time they hanged him, he was a national, well, not a national, but like a big hero in the North. And, there was like people in the streets, like in Massachusetts. They said there was this, it was like a black guy that they would carry around on a giant bell, and he would just ring the fucking bell. Everyone was just very wrapped up in his like religious imagery and his martyrdom. And I wish I could find it. I mean, it's just too much. If you're really interested in this, read this fucking book. It's fucking wild, because I didn't have enough time to take it down. But I mean, the banners they would unfurl at these wakes that they would have for him all over the world would have his just intense, fucking hardcore, dogmatic, like I don't even know what it looks like. Sounds like Boondock Saints type shit in a church, and this is a guy who fucking is holding 2 guns. It was crazy. There would be paintings of him in heaven with like black angels and shit. But he lost to history, right? Because history is written by assholes.
Yeah. Well, we're the assholes rewriting it again.
We're the losers.
History is written by the assholes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The wieners. Okay. Well, that's John Brown. Does anyone have anything to plug? And then let's get out of here.
Well, that's that. Here, I'll go first. Follow me on Twitter at Patak Jokes. I think I have a new radio play coming out this week on the Ballin' Out super feed for Police Academia Blue Hero X, the cop anime I wrote. Check that out. I do very wild voices on it. I think that should be out this week. You heard it here first, people.
Awesome. I'm Naomi Karavani with a K on Twitter. Check out Redacted tonight on YouTube. I hosted the last episode.
Yes, you did. Did a great job. At Anders Lee here on Twitter. You can also see me on Redacted, and possibly will be releasing select chapters from a book I wrote a long time ago about what would have happened if Ralph Nader had been elected president.
He was so close.
Yeah, maybe we'll put it behind the Patreon for subscribers or Substack. I don't know. I'll figure something out.
Fuck. I just remembered. Naomi, who's the guy who betrayed him at the beginning of all this? The French guy?
Italian guy. I forgot his name.
I don't know. He comes.
I said it on the last episode.
He comes into play again post his death. It's not. He didn't rat him out before Harper's Ferry, but he did something after his death. I can't fucking remember. I don't know. Listen. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll make a note in a future episode. This took a lot of research. We don't make much money off this show compared to the research. So I tried as hard as I could. You fucking freaks. Stop yelling at me on the internet. I'm just kidding. I love you. All right. We have merch for sale if you'd like merch. If you're that one person whose merch got sent back 1,000,000 times, I tried it again. I'm trying the 5th time. My person at the post office has a theory about it, like a mailman she doesn't like that's like not taking it. I don't know. It's got nothing to do with us. It's being sent. bigcartel.poddamnamerica.bigcartel.com. Patreon.com/poddamnamerica for our bonus episodes, which we just did a cool one that'll be out this week on James Connolly, the IRA guy.
John Brown of Ireland.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or not the IRA guy, the Irish Republican.
The Irish man.
The Irishman. And yeah, my other show is called Why You Mad. If you haven't heard it, it's very fun. I would like to get that show going really hard too, because me and Luis have a lot of fun on it. That's it. Be good to each other. I don't know what to, I'm not religious like John Brown. I don't know how to end this like him. Strike.
Go with the fury and grace of God.
Fear into the heart of sinners with a fucking sword, which is bathed in the Lord's blood of calves, and he killed a calf with it to sacrifice for God. and then lick it. Okay.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. But his soul goes marching on. The star